Hello everyone, I hope you're well. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Firstly, I wanted to just say thank you to those of you that have watched the 12 days of inspiration via YouTube. Thank you so much for your comments and your likes, etc. They really mean a lot to me, so thank you very much. I spent yesterday just recouping a little bit and I decided to declutter some wardrobes. Doesn't it feel good when you've actually had a little bit of a tidy up? Oh, it feels wonderful. So we actually recycled 15 bags. I think it was 15, it might have been even more. So it felt really good. So I thought I'd pop by to today and just create for the fun of it. For no reason, not because there's a plan or anything like that. And I'm going to use, it's got my little masks in there. I'm going to use the Clematis stamp. So I thought we'd use that. TE5. And at the moment, because postages, you know what it's like at this time of the year. Christmas, there's the same time every year, but it's like bedlam and the post is hit and miss. But I'm going to do free postage, free UK postage until Friday. You just need to use the code Tracy Free Ship. So that's TRACYFREESHIP, Tracy Free Ship. And then you get free postage. And I will send that on 24-hour postage and hopefully you'll just get it as soon as you can. Most people have been receiving it the next day or the day after. So that's perfect. So I'm going to use the Clematis. So let's grab my acrylic block. And I want to take the largest one. There we go. And I'm going to take Versamark ink, and you've guessed it, I've not got a piece of copy paper. There we go. So I've got my copy of paper and I've got my Versamark. So let's move these out of the way so we can actually see what I'm doing. So I'm going to take my Versamark, ink the stamp, lots of tapping, and I really enjoyed the 12 days of inspiration. It was great to reconnect with everybody. It was just lovely, really lovely. And what I'm doing now is I'm just creating because I fancy it and because there's no plan. So I'm going to, which way are you going to start? I'll start there. So I'm just using Versamark watermark stamp pad. It's the sticky ink pad I've used for decades. So I stick to the same one. It works. I don't tend to change. So I use the one that works for me. And I'm going to apply white embossing powder. So let's apply the white embossing powder. There we go. Oh, we missed that bit there. Not even bothered with that bit. And I can see there's a little bit of embossing powder stuck there, which probably means I've had my fingerprints on there, is what that means. So we're just going to go around my card and add this as a background initially onto the card. There we go. So I'm going to change the position each time just so that it's facing a slightly different way, just because I find it more pleasing to the eye. I do find it more pleasing. There we go. And the reason I'm adding the embossing powder as I go along is so I can actually have a visual and see what I'm actually doing. Just makes it a little bit easier for me if I've got that visual, just so that you can see there, which is a great visual for you, not. Let's just place that back. And I've got a much tidier desk today because I really did spend the day organising yesterday, and you always feel much better. And then today I've been out in the garden a little bit and done a little bit more tidying, which feels good as well. Just getting a little bit of fresh air. So that's lovely. Filled the bin again, ready for the bin men tomorrow. Getting all organised for that big Christmas day. Oh, just tipped my powder all onto my glass mat. So I've got a pile of embossing powder there because I wasn't looking. I just reached for the pot. So let's just... And then if you give me 2 seconds so I can just collect this embossing because I wasn't concentrating. Let's put that on the... There we go. Let's just grab that brush so that we can dust everywhere. I'm lethal with embossing powder, especially if I don't look what I'm doing and I'm too busy concentrating on the video. So let's put that all back in the pot. We can't waste that, can we? Absolutely not. So as you can see, I'm creating a background with the stamp and I'm moving it around in different positions. Let's move this here. And because I've got that visual, it makes it a lot easier for me. There we go. She says I can see a little bit. Is that embossing there, or was that might be a mark on the card? There we go. So this one can go that way. So you can see I'm just working to sort of fit the clematis in to create a pleasing background. Now don't rush that, just give that time for that ink to work on the surface of your card. There we go. Let's move them out of the way. Bring in, there we go. And I'm adding the embossing powder all first rather than heating one at a time, because then I won't overheat everything. With it being quite a biggish stamp, I won't overheat a certain area with holding the heat tool too long in a certain place. So we'll bring this in again. And I'm just relaxing, enjoying my creative time. For me, creative time is time for me, and I just unwind whilst I'm thinking, especially if I've got lots to think about, or designing to think about, or paperwork to think about. This just is my way of switching off for a little bit, just to create a little bit of something. I love doing it. I don't have to have a reason. I just love doing it. No reason at all. There we go. So you can see I'm just building that background. Looks lovely as a background, actually. We've just got one more area to do. Just remember, if you're using your Versamark ink, if you've used loads of black ink sort of 10 minutes before, just make sure that your stamp is cleaned, because you don't want to have too much black ink on that Versamark pad, because that's an oily ink. Let's have that down there. There we go. I wonder what that is. That's it. And you can see I always sort of give this time just so that it makes that impression on there. Therefore, you don't get quite as frustrated with your products if you just give them time and you just have a little patience. There we go, that's lovely. Have I got that bit there? That's it. Put the lid on that because I've already shown how dangerous I am. And then you can just look to make sure you've got no extra embossing where you don't want it. So I've got a little bit there, just there. So let's grab that heat tool. We'll move my Versamark ink out the way. And we'll just give this a heat. I'm just heating my heat tool up a little bit, just so that I'm not sitting there too long waiting for that to take effect. There we go. And once it starts to turn, I actually then start to move the heat tool, just so that I don't hold it in one place for too long as it starts to move. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult in the light to actually see what you're doing unless you sort of tilt it, especially when we've got these really dark afternoons as well. Makes it a little bit difficult to see. There we go. And just as that turns glossy, I'm then moving the heat tool and the card. And it just takes a little bit longer because obviously I've got quite a few large images on there. It's not turned there. And you can see when it's not turned because you don't have that glossy element. So you can see quite easily if you've missed a couple of those areas. A little bit there. And then on to the last one. And the heat tool's nice and hot now, so that turns quite quickly. There we go. And then you can quite easily hold that up, and you can see quite easily if you've just missed an area, so that's quite handy. I'm now going to grab some kitchen roll. Let's just move the stamp out of the way. Let's bring this in. Obviously, if you've got your spray boxes, that's wonderful. I haven't got a spray box, mainly because I'm the kind of person that doesn't like to sort of store too much that I don't use that much, because my craft room is not huge, but I do like to keep it tidy. And what I'm doing now is I'm using Distress Oxide Spray Vintage Photo. I've got these in stock. Beautiful warm colour. I don't tend to shake them up and down like this, so then you don't get any seepage. I tend to shake them side to side. The only time I shake them up and down is when I'm trying to get the ball bearing at the bottom going. But I tend to shake them side to side. And what I always do then is I grab a little bit of a wipe, and then I'll just wipe the nozzle just to keep that clear. And I've not had any problems, so that's wonderful. And what I'm going to do is just, there we go, add some of the Vintage Photo. I am then going to take some water, which I was frantically looking for then, thinking, where is the water? So I've got the water, and then I'm going to take, which brush are you going to take, Tracy? Let's take this one of my Nick Pro round brushes, and I'm just going to just make sure that this moves around onto all the sort of embossed areas. If you want to add a little bit more water, you can, just so that it starts to run. It'll also oxidize because you're adding those touches of water which help that ink to oxidize. If you're not happy with it, you can also come in and make it darker. So it's entirely up to you how you do that. You can also place another piece of card on the top if you like, and you can take another print. So you can take another print from the card. What I like to do is I like to just give it a little bit of time just to sit there soaking a little bit, just so that it absorbs into the card and does its job. And you can see by having the kitchen roll here, it's just captured most of the excess ink. And I don't want to blot it too much at the moment. I'm going to take some water and I'm just going to just flick that just onto the surface. And I'm just going to give that a few moments. Again, I don't have to rush. It's a wonderful feeling when you're not rushed to do anything. There's nothing worse than feeling like you've got to rush everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that on one side at the moment. And then I want a Clematis on its own. So whilst I'm doing this, it's giving that ink time to do its thing, which is just lovely. Where are you going? I need some white card. I know I've got loads of white card, but it's always a white card blank I pick up. Look, there's a little card blank there, and I could use that for a card. Oh, you can't get the staff, can you? There must be a piece of card here somewhere. There it is, the biggest piece ever. But never mind, we're going to use it anyway. Now, I'm just going to decide what colour I want to stamp this in. So I think, because I want to colour it in reds. Ooh! So I want to colour this in some reds. You could quite easily use the Clematis for a Christmas card as well if you wanted to, especially if you're going to colour it red like I'm doing. Am I going to colour it red or am I going to use sand dune? No, I want to colour it red. Shall I can't make my mind up. I'm going to colour this in red. I'm just going to stamp this on my spare piece of card. Just stamps beautifully. So this is strawberry. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some colouring. Now I'm going to use my Prisma colours. And because I'm using the Prisma colours, what I need to do is just give this oily ink a little bit of a dry. And the reason I need to dry that is so that my Prisma colours don't pick up the residue of that ink. So I'm just giving this a little bit of a dry. Right, let's grab some colours. So we'll grab some of my Prisma colours. Oops. Oh, I've actually shut this section up, which is unusual for me. Let's open it up again. And I want some of the red colours. So I've got Tuscan red, one of my favourite reds, and maybe, come on Tracy, something a bit lighter. Actually no, we'll use that. And then I want a little bit of purple, but like a sort of a darky one. Let's have black cherry. There we go. Probably had my face in camera then. And whilst I'm doing this, the card that I've created the background on is having time just to settle and rest. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the black cherry, PC1078. And with the black cherry, I'm just going to add a little bit of definition just to my clematis. So I'm going to come in, and I'm not, even though my hands are further down, because if you find that you're pressing on too hard, hold your hands a little bit higher up, just on those pencils, so that you press very lightly. I know now not to press too hard, so I come in and I can quite easily, even though I'm holding my hands a little bit further down, I'm still not pressing too hard, so I don't find that a problem. But if you find that you do press a little bit too hard, then just hold that pencil a little bit higher up, and then it'll stop you from pressing too hard. Should that be an issue for you, it'll stop you pressing too hard, because you don't really want to lay this pigment down too quickly. And what I love is when I'm doing my YouTube videos, I don't have to clock watch or anything. It's wonderful. I'm then going to come to my Tuscan Red PC937. So with the Tuscan Red, I'm going to come in and just go into that black cherry and just colour into the black cherry. And initially it just doesn't look anything special at all. It really doesn't. Then I'm going to come to Crimson Lake. So let's add a little bit of Crimson Lake. And I'm keeping my pencils in order on the piece of card, you can see here. So I'm keeping them in order, just so I know what order I coloured everything in. So leave that there. And then I'm going to use Crimson Red PC924. I'm just going to come in with that Crimson Red just into all the other colours. And I'm leaving a little bit of space at the end, because then I can just blend with a white pencil and take as long as I wish. There we go. Sorry about the tinkling, but that is my husband out the front doing some jobs, and I don't want to stop him. Not while he's making the effort to actually do some, so I won't. So let's come around here just so that that's a little bit darker. Come into this area here. And again, I am not pressing too hard. I'm just adding another layer of that pigment. So I'm just adding another layer of the pigment. If you wanted to, you didn't have to do the stamping in red. You could do that in just sand dune and have the very pale colour. It's entirely up to you how you want to colour everything. But what I can't recommend enough is that you don't press too hard. So that was our black cherry 1078. I'm now going to the Tuscan Red 937, and I'm going into that black cherry with that Tuscan Red, just coming into it with the Tuscan Red. There we go, just just go into that. With the Tuscan red. I don't know why I'm not turning my card, but I'm turning my body instead. There you go. I'm then going to come to Crimson Lake 925. And I do mention these colours a couple of times. And then when I've mentioned them a couple of times, I don't mention them again. And that's mainly because when I'm creating, I know what I'm like. I forget within 35 seconds, to be honest. That's how terrible I am. Move your card, Tracy, not your body. So just coming in. Then I'm going to come to Crimson Red 924. I love this colour, as you can see by the size of the pencil. So I'm just adding another layer of that pigment and just coming in to all the other colours. What I'm going to do then, normally I would sharpen my pencil at this time. In fact, I'm going to do that. What the heck, I'm going to sharpen it. There we go. So I've got a nice sharp pencil now. And I always like to sharpen it at this stage, because what I do then is, so we've got a little bit of the Clematis that sort of folds over here. So I'm just going to emphasize where that folds over, just so that we can see that. Just where it folds over a little bit. And then, isn't there another little bit? Yes, it's there. There we go. And if you're unsure, always grab your acetate, and that will give you a little bit of an indication if you're a little bit stuck on where it might be. So I've just highlighted just those areas a little bit. And then here, I'm going to highlight a little bit of the centre area. I'm obviously going to add touches of white as well. Just going to add a little touch of white as well. So I'm coming in now, and I'm just adding a little bit more of this definition. And I'm being a little bit more precise, but I am not pressing. Let's move those out of the way. I'm not pressing too hard. I'm just coming in and adding another layer of my waxy pencil. Turn that round a little bit. And I want to try and sort of give it, you know, a nice blended look, just so that it is a little bit like you can imagine it being quite velvety. There we go. Let's go and add a little bit there. So just take your time adding those colours. That's my darkest colour. Then I'm going to come in and I'm going to use the Tuscan red. So we'll just use that Tuscan red. And because I've used that red base, it works quite nicely. So we'll come with the Tuscan red. Just really helps with that velvety feel with the red red base. The problem with me is I always forget where I've done. Doesn't take long. There we go. Then I'm going to come to my Crimson Lake 925 and go into the other colours with the 925. And as that smooths out, I can see the difference. Going into the other colours as well. So going into those other colours. And when you've got the camera to look through, it really gives you a sense of, you know, what you're achieving. And then coming to the Crimson Red. And with the Crimson Red, I'm going to go into all the other colours. There we go. So just go into the other colours with the palest colour. Just spending a little bit of time just blending that way, Tracy. And that's it. It's beginning to look sort of a bit velvety now. I've got my light on, that's why there's a little bit of a sheen. So then I'm going to take my white, my Prismatic white. I love my white pencil. And what that does is it drags the little bit of the last colour. So the last colour was Crimson Red. And what the white does is it'll pick up that red and it just drags it out a little bit. And what that also does is softens the edges of that red so that I haven't got too harsh a line where I've added that last colour. So it just helps to blend the last colour a little bit, just a little bit. And on this larger petal, you'll see blending out. You see picking up that red, and it then turns it into a paler colour as if it's another shade, and drags that out so that it just gives it a lovely, lovely blend. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take my Inktense pencil. Let's grab the Inktense pencil. And let's grab my really fine brush, which I hope is somewhere I can just reach. So this, I can't tell what this brush is. The what? The Tiny Artist brush. I just search for some sort of mini brushes. But what I'm going to do now, let's grab a little bit of water here so that we've got that there. Now, I want it a little bit darker, just around there. I want a little bit more depth there. I want a little bit more depth there. Maybe a little bit more here. And just where the petals just meet a little bit, just a little bit more darkness. And I've got this fine brush because that will dictate how much moisture I've got on there, which really helps. So I can just blend. Now, because it's an Inktense pencil, that goes onto so many surfaces. And once it's dry, it's permanent, which is ideal. So just let's have a little bit there, then come back to this, just so it's a little bit darker. So it just gives a little bit darker area just in the centre a little bit. I'm then going to rinse that brush. Now don't swipe across this because you've only just laid it on and it will smudge. So don't sort of go straight on there. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to take some of my bleed proof white, Dr. P.H. Martin's. Does exactly what it says on the tin. It's bleed proof. So in other words, if like the Oxide, say you've got the Oxide as a base, I haven't on this, but if you've got the Oxide as a base, the Oxide reacts to any moisture, and therefore if some whites will be tinged with your Oxide colour. So if I use this bleed proof white, it means that then it won't be tinged. So I'm going to add a little bit of white here. And then I'm going to add I'm not coming in I'm coming in sort of very lightly. I don't want to come in too harshly so that it doesn't look right if you've got massive blobs. Let's move that up there a little bit. So I'm just taking my time and just adding a little bit of the white. Now, if it's not moving enough for you, you can just add a little bit more water, but don't add too much. You want to be mindful that you don't add too much. The problem with me is I never know when to stop adding the white. I am terrible. I just want to keep doing it over and over again. So I love adding a little touch of white because it really starts to come to life. If I just add a little touch. And every time I colour this Clematis, I colour it differently. Every single time. Part of the fun, I suppose. Now I'm using the lid and I'm dropping all the white bits on the lid. Really handy. So let's take all those bits off. Just out the lid. Let's wipe this up. And then let's give this little brush a little bit of a clean. I'm being very sort of mindful that I don't leave my brushes with, obviously if you've got a jar of water, that's perfect. Me and a jar of water when you're demonstrating don't work, so I sometimes don't bring one with me. I'm then going to cut the Clematis out. I'm going to use my Pergamano scissors. I love the Pergamano scissors, but I've used these for decades because they just come to that lovely point, but it's sharp right to the point, and it really helps me, that does. But what I don't like doing when I'm cutting out is I like a smaller piece of card. So let's just cut that out so I haven't got such a huge piece of card. And I think in my next few projects I'm going to use the Clematis. So we will, and I'm going to leave a tiny white border just so that it sets it off a little bit with having the white embossing in the background. I think that'll set it off quite nicely. So just a tiny white border. If you don't want to leave a white border, you can cut yours straight out, right to the edge of the stamp. But I like to colour first and cut out, particularly if I'm leaving a white border. That way, if I've gone slightly over the edge a little bit, I can sort of judge my cutting then. But these pointed scissors really help getting in there with the fine detail. And I'm a card turner, so I tend to turn my card rather than my hands. I just find it easier that way. There we go. And this video will probably be live on Monday, because when you're recording, the only disadvantage of the winter months is you do run out of time for taking photographs, because it gets dark very quickly and quite early on during the afternoon. Yes, this looks lovely in these colours, but you could quite easily create a Christmas card with this as well. And the white touches really lift that. And I think these colours will go beautifully with that backdrop that we've created. And because I haven't dried the backdrop, I sort of let it do its own thing. The inks have really soaked in to that card, and we've got some nice dark areas for some depth in there, and it works rather nicely. There we go. Let's move that out of the way. And if I bring this in now, you can see that most of it has dried. Let's just move this messy kitchen roll. And what you'll notice, if you let it dry a little bit on its own, you get these sort of darker areas. And the longer you can let that dry, the better, because you've got those dark areas on there. So I'm going to give this a little dry now. If I was you, I would let yours dry naturally, but I'm giving it a little dry because I can't really proceed with that much moisture on there. Now, what you have to remember is you've got that embossing on there, haven't you? So you can't sort of keep your heat tool in one area. Hence, I'm moving it around so that I don't keep it in one area. I'm also drying back and front. Now, I don't want to dry too much because I don't want to affect that embossing. But you see, this will then go beautifully just on there with that pop of velvety red with a touch of purple on there. It looks rather nice. Now, I was going to dab. Now, obviously, the areas you can dab, let's just... So the areas you can dab are your embossing. So where you've got it embossed, that's not going to dry on there anyway, because the embossing resists the area. So you can just come in, and where you've got that embossing, you can just dab a little bit. The outside areas, you don't want to dab that too much because you want to keep that. You want to keep that working. Right, let me just check my pencils. So that has got brushed corduroy. Gather twigs. Set 5, that's what I want. Right. You can then add a little bit more definition to these if you want. So I've got set 5 of the Distress pencils. And in set 5 there is, I'm sure I've just read it, there it is. Do you know when you look at something and think, I'm sure I've just seen that. So just press that up. There we go. Let's just wipe that. And you can see there's still some more moisture on there. And I've got gathered twigs. And I can dip this gathered twigs in here. And this is a little bit darker than vintage photo. And I can just add a little bit of the gathered twigs just to give a little bit more definition just to my floral. So you've then got the vintage photo around the outside, but then I'm adding the gathered twigs to the floral just so that that is a little darker. And I'm using the water because that just allows me to apply the ink so that I'm using that rich pigment just so that it's a little bit darker. So it'll be a little bit darker than the outside because the gathered twigs is a little bit darker. Okay, so we're just giving it a little bit more work. And you can see that, I got that on my hand. You can see how much water I've used. And you can see there's still water on the card. I've not completely dried it. So I'm just giving those florals a little bit more depth. Let's come in. And in real life, I can see where I've added the gathered twigs pencil. And what you can do then is just make sure. What I like to do is I sort of like to give it a polish just with a dry piece of kitchen roll when it's all dry. So I tend to give that a little polish once it's all dry, especially the areas I can see. So let's just give this a little waft now. And you can see I'm wafting that heat tool just so that it doesn't stay in any one area particularly. You can see I'm wafting it. So I'm not keeping it in one area on the embossing. I'm simply wafting it just so that and now that I've got those dark areas on there, I'll grab another piece of kitchen roll. And I know I've got the depth now. So I'm just going to take my kitchen roll, just rub it a little bit so it's softer. And then I'm just going to dab initially, just dab a few bits up. Take another area. And then I'm just going to just give that a little bit of a polish. Can you see how much comes off? So I'm just going to give it a polish again. I'm not adding any more moisture. I'm just giving it a little bit of a polish. And then I'll just take one dry area, use a tiny bit of water and just clean up the embossing just a little bit. So just clean that embossing up just a little tiny bit. There we go. just gives me that beautiful background, and means that I use the poinsettia again in a different way. I'm then going to take, where is TE45? On TE45, we've got some lovely text that talks about plants and garden. So I'm going to use TE45. Just take that text. And I'm going to use Portobello. Just ink that up. Just to add some little bits of text here and there. And obviously when I put my floral, I adhere my floral, obviously some of that text will be hidden, but some of it will still be visible. And I'm using the Portobello, which is a permanent ink, and I'm using that directly onto the Oxide. Now, because I'm using it directly on the Oxide, I need to be aware that that will just sort of be on the surface. So I do need to give that a little dry. So I've added my Portobello. I'm then going to add a little bit of my Nocturne. So let's take a little bit of the Nocturne. And this will stand out, or you can just drop it on the thingy. This will stand out a little bit more with it being the black. And I'm not sort of planning too much. I'm just adding some little touches of random stamping. Some will show, some will not be visible because the floral may just hide that. But I've just added a little bit of black as well, just so that it gives it a little bit more oomph. So let's just clean our surface area. And because I've let this dry quite a long time whilst we coloured the floral, it's done its thing and it's not too bendy, just so you can see this. I'm now going to grab some cotton. So I'm going to grab some white cotton. So let's take, and I'm pulling out long, loose lengths. Don't get the polyester cotton like I did once and nearly take my hands off. Just spread that out a little bit. It's going to be down here. Okay, let's just leave that like that. I'm then going to take the TE45 again. I'm going to take this one here. So we'll take this stamp. Let's just grab it. Move that out of the way. Why don't I put the text stamp back? I'll give that a clean at the back because it's quite grubby. And that you can just add all the ink to your non-stick craft sheet. I'll use a little bit of hand sanitizer. Mainly because on this non-stick craft sheet, the oil just stains. So I'm just cleaning that up. Just with a little bit of sanitizer. Smells nice as well. So I'm going to grab a spare piece of card again. Let's move that out of the way. Let's move those pencils out of the way. I'll take this. And then I'm going to grab my Portobello. Again, if you don't like cutting out, you don't have to do any cutting out. I do love a little bit of cutting out, especially when I'm creating like this and I'm just enjoying myself because I want to create. There we go. Let's just pull that out of the way a minute. Bring in my card. I'm going to cut some of this out just so that I've got some foliage. And again, you can see I'm leaving a little bit of a white border. You can use your sisal nest, etc. if you've got some sisal nest, just to give a little bit of texture. I can hear something outside, I don't know what. So I'm just cutting this out because I want some sort of foliagey kind of bits and pieces just to give it a little bit more interest. And I love doing things like this. It reminds me of messing with sort of twiggy bits in the garden and making little arrangements in your vases. I love doing that too as well. And this time of year is perfect for that. I will be using some pin flare, so let's grab that so we have that ready. So I'm going to grab my Clematis and I'm just going to use my scissors. Let's just bend the petals a little bit. Ouch. I'm just using my scissors. You can use your professional proper tools that you have. I'm just giving the floral a little bit more movement, that's all. Don't place it down yet, Tracy. I'm going to take my pin flare. You can use your 3D foam pads, whatever floats your boat. There we go. Make sure you capture that cotton. You really do want to capture the cotton. And what I can do is I can push these sort of foliage bits into the pin flare, but then I don't sort of stick down the leafy bits because it just gives it a little bit more dimension. I absolutely love this stamp. Oh, sorry, thumb's aching. It's only because Drip here fell over. So let's just cut this out. Let's get rid of some of that card, then we're not messing with that so much. There we go. I just love that it gives it a little bit more interest. I love it. Absolutely love it. And I know it's a busy time of year, this time of year, but I still spend a little bit of time being creative. There we go. Determined not to waste this little bit. I want some at the bottom as well. And by leaving just a little bit of a white border, it does make it a little bit easier to cut out, to be fair. You can use any foliage, twigs, anything you want. But it makes me happy when I'm using my stamps. There we go. actually quite warm out today, gardening. I was quite surprised after I've been gardening for about an hour. I was absolutely boiling. And we're in December. Mind you, I suppose we get most of the worst of the weather in January and February, don't we? Really. But it was quite mild today. My husband was really pleased, me mentioning jobs all the time. And he's thinking, oh, I'll just have a weekend sitting doing nothing. No, you won't. Not a chance. There we go. So I'm then going to push this just, I can trim. I don't have to worry about, I like a good faff. Oh, actually, that's nice. There we go. And then if I don't want that showing, I can just, you see, obviously the pin flare. The pin flare moves. So don't, you know, don't expect it to sit still. Come off, Tracy. Let's wrap that around there. There we go. So obviously that pin flare after 24 hours will be absolutely solid. Let's move these out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. Just so that I've got a little bit of the foliage on there as well. And I can then still see the text underneath. You can still see that text. Mine's dried quite nicely, actually. If you need to dry your text, just give it a little waft with the heat tool. I'm then going to add some bleed proof white again. So let's grab the bleed proof white. Let's add a little bit to my non-stick craft sheet, and then we can just roll the brush straight through it. Just, there we go. Just grab a little bit of water. And I'm just going to use my fan brush. I will use this as well, just see if some of this comes off. Not much. So let's use that fan brush. And then we'll just add so I'm adding some of the bleed proof. I don't think there's enough there. And the reason I'm using the bleed proof is you've got that dark brown. Didn't need that much, but you've got that dark brown out there in the background. And because of that, if I use my Posca pen, it's just going to go a creamy colour, and I don't really want that. I want something that's got the white on there. Now, if you put this in a paint palette, you can just activate it again. That's it. Now this will stay white then. That's it. Let's move that out of the way and we'll just wipe this up. And then I can just clean these brushes in some water afterwards. There we go. If you're going to be sitting a long time, leave your brushes in a damp wipe and then they won't set solid. Just give that a little bit of a waft. And then I'm going to grab, let's move this one out of the way. Let's put this back. What's this? It's my black card, Tracy. So let's just place this back. It's just out of our way then. I haven't got too many things in the way. I'm going to grab the Clematis word. So I'll just grab that Clematis word. Let's pick that up. I was about to say to you then, what did I do with the card? I'm then going to grab my black ink. Take that black ink. So the Nocturne ink, just so that works with the background. The word Clematis, or whatever you want to call it. Then we'll just cut this out with my larger scissors. I always end up with little bits here, there and everywhere. Sorry about my arm across the project. And I then want to add the word Clematis. And I think I'm just going to add it down here, just so that we can see that. You can add a faux black mat if you wish. Let's add this to our card. Now you've got that embossing on there, so just give that a little bit of time, just until the adhesive grabs hold. When that grabs hold, we will add a little bit of shading just to the base of that word. So I'm using my grey, it's called Chinese ink. So I'm using that one. Now this has got lots of white on it, so we don't want the white. And obviously if you've got a jar of water, you'll be cleaning your brushes quite easily with a jar of water. So I'm then just going to touch that, just so that I've got that little bit of shading under there. We'll then add this to a black mat. So let's add this to a black mat. I always think the matting and layering really finishes something off really nicely. And there'll still be moisture in this card, so make sure you just add some in the centre there. Let's add this. I'm going to pick this up because I just find it far easier. There we go. Don't forget to press in the centre as well, where you've added that adhesive, so you don't end up with any bubbles. So obviously there's been a lot of me bending on there, because obviously we've had a lot of moisture on the card. So let's just convince it a little bit. Once it grabs hold, it's all very easy. But obviously that pin flare will not be dry at the moment. There we go. Then I'm going to add this to my white card blank, which I'm going to make sure is the right way. Add that to our card blank. There we go. And again, I'm just going to give that just a few moments, just for the adhesive just to grab hold. The pin flare will take longer, but that's fine. There we go. And if I lift that up, you can then see our finished piece, just so that you can see that. I'm really pleased with that. So I hope you enjoy giving that a go and pulling out your stamps, whether it's now or after the festive period. So love to all, everyone, and I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.